Progress doesn't come easy. You've come too far to quit now. Strength is earned, not given. You're stronger now, not because you started, but because you never stopped.
You go shh into a microphone, for some reason, it makes people just slowly start to be quiet. Did you notice that? That was Willie Thorne, the snooker commentator, that told me if you go shh into a microphone, it works. I don't know why. Maybe someone knows. Is it the vibration? Is it the fact that you think you're at school and someone's saying to be quiet? Shh, shh, shh. Is everyone having a good day? It's been pretty interesting, right? I mean, I don't know about you. I think there's some shell-shocked looks on some people's faces, like, okay, all right, I can't run away from this anymore. There's some things that are definitely changing. The industry is changing, and it's just really a question, as Casey said, is this something you want to be a part of in some way, shape, or form? So please come and take your seats. Come and take your seats. It probably won't surprise you that my biggest takeaway really has been what Leisure DB wants to do in terms of the data of the people that come and use our facilities, and really start to professionalize our industry like never before. Please come and take your seats. Guys, come on, let's come and sit down. We got a lot of stuff to cover this afternoon. And we have our next panel coming up. There he is. There's Glen. Okay, shh. I know there's people there at the back still trying to get some coffee, tea. Okay. So over the last few weeks, I've got to know Glen pretty well, and he's the Chief Strategy Officer for Leisure DB. And it's really interesting just hearing his enthusiasm for our industry and what he wants to do and just take things to the next level. So I'm going to welcome him up on the stage, and also our panel. Can we please give Glen a big round of applause, please? But please also welcome onto the stage Duncan Mann, Nathan Berkeley, Tanya Hall, and Ian Murray. Can we give them all a big round of applause, please? Come on up. The stage is yours. Have you been told where you're sitting? Good.
All good?
Oh, here's your mic.
Long way round.
Thank you very much.
I should hopefully, but yeah, I can hear myself. Good start. Okay. We all good, guys? Happy. Okay. I wear glasses and I can't see anything. So with the light shining in my eyes, I will try to keep myself on target with the slides. But today what we're going to do is we're going to try and look at what we do with data. Because data on its own is just numbers. So it's how you interpret data, it's how you create narratives, it's how you create those arguments so that people listen to you. Because in my personal, humble opinion, I think this is the most incredible sector in the world, the only sector that can affect national GDP and productivity. And if we make the right arguments backed by data that unequivocally cannot be challenged, because it's truth, with a bit of our own interpretation, I think we can change the world. We are at that golden point. David is absolutely right. There won't be another pandemic, hopefully. But fundamentally, the next stage of our evolution as an industry is all to do with how we utilize data. So today, we have our esteemed panel here, and these are their job titles. But I don't see them as those people. So first of all, we have Ian, and Ian is basically an expert in individual health and bone density. And we're going to kind of drill down into some kind of unique individual numbers for simple metrics for people's health. Things that I believe we should all be doing. I have done this. I went with Tanya. It was incredible. Please come and ask us about it later. Tanya Hall, who is from eGym, talks about community data, collaborative community programs that get populations older adults, special populations working, and the people that are not in our 16.6% into our facilities. And we need more of those. We need to be part of that NHS cycle and be at that preventative stage of medicine. That is where we belong. James Brown, no relation. Genomic data. Oh, I thought you were going to sing for a second there, but you can if you want.
I can if you want.
Well, we can do, or a dance, I don't mind. Genomic data, personalized data, but also more interestingly, blockchain. Now, I have my own experiences within the whole genetic world and how we use that within professional sports and things, but fundamentally, the nervousness around data, especially when you start talking about genetics, is quite high, especially with the demise of 23andMe. So we're going to teach you and talk to you all about, not your fault, was it? Talk to you all about how that security and that data honesty and security is now a lot more protected than what it was before, because that's what people worry about, is privacy. Duncan Mann on the end here does something absolutely incredible, because I've never really thought about what happens in the facility, because I've always thought about what people are doing. And in my journey of owning gyms, essentially we always looked at the customer, we used genetic testing, we used individual data, but I never really thought about the facility. Was I optimizing my facility? I am that Mr. 1%. I will think about everything on my own personal journey, but when it comes to business, and we all understand what business KPIs are all about, are we optimizing the space that we have? Have you got the right kit in the right places? Have you got the right numbers of staff at the right times to service people? All of these little things create what the customer really values, and that is the community part of what we do. And there is no better sector from a motivational point of view to get people moving than us. And I really do believe that is our sole divine purpose. So what we're going to do to start with is talk about data, because data is actually seen as the new gold, okay? But unlike gold, it's personal, it's dynamic, and no pun intended, it's all about evolving, okay? So what we're going to do first and foremost is basically look at some of the landscape and define some of that landscape and some of the data. So what I've asked all the panelists to do is actually give me a brain dump of data. So these will be available at the end. We will send them all to you. You will be able to dive into them. There are things on these slides that stick out, but essentially, my first question to the panel, and we're going to work down the panel in order with a slide from each of them, which have been created absolutely perfectly, is how are each of you using data, okay, to create better outcomes personally, individually, communities, but also for business outcomes. So Ian, we're going to start with you. Over to you, Ian.
Yeah, hello everybody. I'll just give you a quick background on what we did and how we got there, and then I'll bring the data in and how it's very, very relevant to where we are now. So about 16 months ago, Performance Health Systems, we created a new vertical, effectively, called Performance Health Systems MSK, and that was to combat the bone health pandemic that is going on in the UK at the moment. We knew with some of our products, such as PowerPlate and Biodensity, that we had the solution to increasing bone density to help with issues such as osteoporosis, osteopenia. So we set out into the market, and we didn't understand why more people weren't understanding their bone health. It's a major, major pandemic. If I was to ask everybody in the room right now, how many of you know your T-score, which is your bone density score, I'm pretty sure 99% wouldn't know it. And the 1% that do know it, half of them have probably done it through us in the last 12 months. And the reason for that is because the gold standard in the UK right now is called a DEXA. Now, that looks like an MRI scan, and that's how we bone screen in the UK. Now, to give you a bit of background, you can't necessarily get access to a DEXA unless you're over 60 and broken a bone. Maybe that's part of the problem. So we set out on a mission to try and make bone health more of a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach. There are obviously other pathways you can get a hold of a DEXA. For example, they'll check your bone density for the eroding of the bone if you are a cancer patient, as an example, when you're going through chemotherapies. There are other obviously ways that you can get to a DEXA, or you can go private, but the waiting list is long. If anyone's followed it, there's loads of media going around at the moment from the Royal Osteoporosis Society, because I'm not going to say again, we're going through a bone health pandemic and we don't know about it, but maybe that's why they call it the silent killer. But we need more bone screening, more education, and get more of that feedback so we can do something back in a proactive manner. The second reason from the screening side, why people aren't known about their bone health is because the biggest belief out there is that it's an older person's problem, i.e. 70, 80s, I'll worry about it later in life. Absolutely, 200% factually incorrect. Our bone declines from the age of 30, and our medical advisory board, amongst a number of GPs in this country, are now worried that, well, we're seeing it more and more actually before the age of 30 now, but they're worried the younger generation of today are never going to hit peak bone mass. So it's alarming. The foods that we eat, the milks that we drink, etc., we could be the first generation, when we're older, we're going to be looking after our kids with brittle bones rather than them looking after us when we're older. So if I was to tell you the bones decline from the age of 30, if I was to tell you that menopausal women during perimenopause lose up to 5% of their bone density per year, if I was to tell you that we've got a number of elite athletes that are being bone screened now through our process, mainly cyclists and swimmers, from high-intensity training and low bone loading, the minerals are being stripped from their bones. We've now got 306 cases, roughly, that's very specific, of Ozempic cases coming through. And then some more stats for you while I'm gathering the data in my head is that if you're over the age of 50 and you fracture your hip and you've got osteoporosis and you're not aware of it because you obviously haven't been bone screened, there's a 24% chance you'll be dead within 12 months. That's a fact. That's Royal Osteoporosis factual information. So just collating all of that data that I've just given you and all them facts and them stats, there's more to come, is the second highest cost of the NHS, 4.4 billion a year we spend on the NHS fixing MSK being musculoskeletal, so I appreciate it's not all bone health, but they work hand in hand. So you can see there's a major problem there. It's the second highest reason, second biggest reason behind mental health for staff absenteeism in the workplace. So putting all of that data together that I've just given you, where on earth is that an old person's problem? Okay, so we've now teamed up with EchoLite, the Italian gold standard for bone screening. Nothing wrong with a DEXA. It hasn't been any innovation on DEXA for 30 years. So we turned to the EchoLite, and the main reasons why is because, one, it's non-invasive. EchoLite is, DEXA is invasive. Low level, it's still invasive. So EchoLite's non-invasive. It's a portable unit, so we can access thousands. We've got a meeting with Wes Streeton in July, the Health Secretary, because I think he's realised that obviously we can access the thousands of people because there's a bone screening issue and an education problem getting that data out to society, so to speak. And the last thing is, which is the key part coming back to the data question, is that it doesn't only just give you your T-score, which is, from anything up to -5 on osteoporotic or osteopenic, but it gives you your fragility score. Because it is an ultrasound technology, it feeds back more data. It gets into the microarchitectural level. So, for example, how holy your bone is to you and I. And that's important. That data is absolutely crucial, which is not what we're getting back on that level from a DEXA. And the reason why that's important is because you might have two people that are osteoporotic, -2.9. Let's take that figure, osteoporotic, in the red. But if one's been a gymnast or a dancer all their life, and they're thudding, and they're using that bone loading over a long period of time, the microarchitecture of their bone is going to be significantly stronger. So currently, two people at -2.9 would be given the same pathway. Where now that we're getting that detail and that feedback from that data through the EchoLite, and we're seeing the microarchitecture of your bone, two people might be 2.9, but if the microarchitecture of your bone is stronger, your fragility risk is significantly less, which means your pathways are completely different. I'll give you an example, and I appreciate it's a data conversation, so I have checked on GDPR and got permission from the lady I'm just about to explain. So Ruth Thurgood, she's the CEO of Screen My Bones, the screening part of our business, the ecosystem that we put together. She worked 30 years in the NHS around bone health. She got diagnosed with osteoporosis in her 40s. The feedback that she got, she was to go on to biphosphonates, which helps supporting with the bone decline. She got told to avoid bending, and she got told to swim for her exercise, non-weight bearing. So for 20 years, she's done that. She's been cautious. She's from Wales. She liked to walk the dog in the valleys and used to go hiking and all the rest of it. And she stopped all of that, and rightly so, because she was cautious. Now that we've screened her, she's actually got a less than 20% fragility score. She's now in her mid-60s. And she's got her life back completely on the basis of that. So the current data that we would use, that would be frighten any other therapist. But now that we know that data to that level through the microarchitecture of your bone, through the echo light, we are now able to make massive differences from that data in people's lives. So that, to me, isn't just game-changing, that's life-changing.
Yeah, and I've experienced this with Tanya. A couple of weeks ago, we went up, we did a bone screening score. I've been an elite athlete in my earlier years. I've trained heavily, like the majority of people in this room. But I'm slightly different to Tanya in our backgrounds, but we both came out with good bone scores. But the whole process was just super simple, wasn't it? Really easy to deliver. It's a turnkey solution. Steve Campbell, wherever you are in the room, absolute legend. He did the scan on behalf of Performance Health Systems, and quite honestly, this is a necessity for us to bring this into all of our facilities, public health and private, because it's the one thing that really does predict what happens later on in life, and it does affect your mental health if all of a sudden you start making more falls and trips and things, and it kind of will isolate you from society, and that's when things start to break down. And really what longevity is about is not living longer, it's about living better for as long as possible. And that starts not when you're in the shit, it starts when you're okay. And so all of these kind of modalities are so simple for us to do. And sometimes, some of you will be doing this stuff already, but if you're not, please do come and speak to Ian about this, because, the one stat that jumps out to me, and someone told me I had a laser on this, so I'm going to use it. This stat down here, okay, which basically says that around 20% of fractures, okay, you'll be dead within 12 months after a hip fracture in older populations. Now that really shouldn't be happening. And we're the people that can help fix that. So just think about that for a second. So
just that, I'll just butt in on there. Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
We talk a lot about lifespan versus health span. We've talked about it today,
Yep.
just touching on your point. So this all started with Gary Rhodes from the screening side of things, because he reversed his grandma's osteoporosis using biodensity. She was 78 and reversed it at 17, 18 months. And the fact is, he always talks about seeing her in chronic pain. We are living longer, but we're living longer in chronic pain. So if we can go right the way back and have a proactive approach to our bone health, we can start stopping even getting to an osteoporosis, because we're in a reactive state at the moment. And that's the biggest problem that we're having. You should be having an annual screening of bone health every single year as part of your wellness program. Because when you think about it, the jacket that I wear, the lack of muscles that I've got, the skin, everything sits on top of the skeletal system. Yet 99% of this room don't know their bone density score.
Yeah. And Big Pharma, which is what we always think, oh my God, they're massive, we're never going to compete with them. Well, all they do with their drugs is they just, stop you feeling those things. It's bullshit. We can fix it. And that's really the power of this room. We can all do this, and we can bring this to the masses, which makes our numbers go from 16.6% to 17.6%. to 27.6 to 50.6. That's the opportunity that I see in front of us. So thank you. I mean, we could talk all day. I'm going to go off script, so I'll try not to. So Tanya, same question to you, obviously, if we can pass the mic along. EGM being collaborative community data, the work that they do is incredible with older adults and populations as well, but Tanya, if you could expand on that as well, that'd be great.
Awesome, thanks Glenn. Hello everyone. Coming back to that original question on how we use data, for us it's a three-staged approach. First of all, we've got to consider the members, what do they want and what do they need? And for us it's about that feedback data. How can we give them feedback to keep them improving? And for us, it's taking all of those metrics to be able to personalise and gamify their program. So we know through all of the stuff that we do and all the data that we collect, that the more personalised data that we collect, the more we can make their program as personalised as possible to achieve their goals, the more likely they are to hit their goals. When we start to step that up to an operation level, we're then looking at how can people use that data to become as efficient as possible within their business. So for them, it's all about making the right operational decisions because they've got the tangible data to prove and they've got the evidence to back it up. And then even higher up, when you look at how we use the data, it's all around the big community cohorts. So how can we look at this data and really ascertain what's working and what isn't? we can look at the studies that we do, but the really key metric with us is because we collect so much data from every single touch point that a user has with what we do, we can effectively then make really big decisions based on accurate data and look at community-led programs based on actual results versus putting our finger in the air and trying to guesstimate what we're trying to achieve. So your stories were really inspirational, but that was Jim.
Brilliant.
I'll get some inspirational stories later, don't worry.
Definitely.
No,
And look, again, I'll use my laser because someone gave me one. But, 10 kilograms of weight loss in 3 months for people with obesity. That's the effect. We have to dovetail these solutions into things like Ozempic and stuff. We have to be part of the same kind of holistic solution of different modalities. But we have more to do. So, we always talk about retention. Nobody wants the members going out this door, and we're always trying to, attract new ones. But fundamentally, using eGym services, we've got a 17% less churn. And, if somebody told me that in a board meeting about my bottom line, then I'd be pretty happy. So, if you're not using these things, these guys will literally take you to their doorstep and show you how to use this stuff. And it's incredible stuff. So, it answers a lot of the problems. And it's serving the customers that we already had, which is what we talked about this morning, but then also looking at that other 84% of people that really should be part of our whole world, and we should be helping them to live healthier for longer, okay? So, pass the mic. Oh, you've already got another one. Good, someone gave us 2. So, James, is that working, or do you want to?
No, it's not. It is.
Oh, it is?
Can
Good.
you hear me? Cool.
Okay, good. Go.
So I think from our point of view, we're definitely moving from a reactive way of looking after our health to more proactive, and that might have spawned out of COVID and everyone trying to be a bit more diligent about how to improve their health because we weren't really getting any help from the government, if I'm perfectly honest. One area that we can probably do that with is an area that obviously Moody cover, is DNA and epigenetic testing. From a genetic point of view, I think it acts as a nice foundation to look after your health, because we've all got strengths and weaknesses that we're all going to have genetically. But it does put you down a nice pathway and a health foundation to work off. And then on top of that, we've got this new and exciting area of science called epigenetics. And the difference between the two, basically epigenetics allows you to gamify genetics. You can see how your day-to-day life, your environment, your lifestyle, all the good things you're doing, some of the bad things you're doing, how they're affecting the way your genes are actually functioning and expressing. So we've gamified genetics. It does act as an overall barometer for your health, because we can track various things such as your biological age. Are you accelerating your age through the things you're doing every day? That's from an individual point of view. From a community level, we've been fortunate to be part of quite a large study by the European Union and the UK government called the Horizons Project. And what this basically is looking at very early onset Alzheimer's and dementia detection, and we're the epigenetic partners. So what we're basically doing in a nutshell, we've genetically and epigenetically profiled 4,000 people over the European Union and the UK and throughout the UK, and we can see specifically how the genes associated with Alzheimer's and dementia, if they're being turned up or being turned down. Are you heading towards getting Alzheimer's, or are you okay? And then we can put interventions into place to hopefully negate, slow, or reverse that process. So I think 2 data points from a genetic point of view and an epigenetic point of view. When you're using that data, it can be really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, again, on the slides with the laser, 72% of consumers out there are interested in understanding this. And as Casey said earlier, if we don't do it, guess what? They're going somewhere else. Now, I opened a gym pre-COVID. We sold a annual membership, so 330 quid up front, and we gave a genetic test for free. A year later, 96% of those people signed up again for another year. So not only are we talking about health changing, but we're talking about solidifying business, because when you know those revenue lines are coming in, you can make better decisions and you can grow your services. So people want it. If we don't deliver it, someone else will. So Duncan, I'm going to move on to your slide now, which is slightly different, because I asked Duncan, we're doing a trial at the moment with one of the clubs that we own down in Chertsey, and we have been doing a trial, and quite honestly, I went down for a meeting after a week, and I sat with Matt, the manager, and I was like, no, just ask him how's it going? Has it done anything yet? And he just turned around to me and went, it's incredible. I've already changed things. It's not for me to tell you, it's for Duncan.
That's a nice intro. Yeah, so I'm Duncan Mann. I'm the CEO of a company called Hoxton AI. And what we do is we help operators understand how people use their space. So what we've got here is the site. So how many people are in the site that you've got, but then also, once they're through the front door, where do they go? Because it's usually a black hole as to which assets they're in. So you can see here at 6:05, when I think I snapped this picture, 196 people at the Riverbourne Club. In the whole site, there's, I think, 58 in the pool, there were 80 in the gym, and so you can see each asset and how busy they are and how that's fluctuated throughout the day. Now, it might be obvious, but just to spell out why this is important, it's because all of your operational decisions should be around how the space is used, right? Your staff, you should have more staff in spaces where there are more people to improve the experience. You shouldn't have them where it's where fewer people or it's empty. Or your cleaning rotors should be targeting usage. Like a space is used a lot, it should be cleaned a lot. If it's empty all the time, you don't need to clean it. But most of the time, people clean on like a 2-hourly rota. So this is just making better use of the operational resources that you've got. Or even more simply, peaks and troughs in demand really, in busyness, really impact the experience of the member. So seeing where you peak, you might have a good sense of where that might be at 6 o'clock, in the evening, but there are other peaks in the day, and trying to smooth that all out means that you're making better use of the asset when it's emptier, and you're not overcrowding it when it's busy. So it's just sensible data on how and where people go, so that you can plan better, be more cost effective, and hopefully increase retention. So yeah, it's actually, we're quite new to this space because most of our customers they're all really in, the Tate Modern. We've got people like Center Parks, but they're all leisure sites where people care about experience. It's exactly the same challenge here, which is who's coming, like how many people are here and where are they going, and how do I make sure the space is fit for purpose? So we try and make getting that data really easy. That's key to us.
Yeah, and the example that you haven't alluded to, so I'm going to push you on it, with Matt was to do a reception, wasn't it? And Tuesdays and Thursdays is a swim session, and Matt had his operational staff in place on reception, believing that there were 700.
Yeah, so this always happens. So a lot of people do their operations on sort of gut feel, but the data often brings out quite surprising results. So Matt knew that there were 700 member swipes coming into the site on a day. So that was the assumption, is 700 people came here today. But the truth is there's an NHS clinic there, there's people that come for temporary passes, there's kids that do karate and their parents come through. It turned out that there were 700 member swipes. There were 1,400 people in the day that came through the door. So it's twice as many people. Had no idea that it was that big. But that has lots of implications, right? The reception staff are probably overwhelmed at certain times of the day. You need to know when that is. So maybe staff them more. Or things like the cafe, which they thought had a certain conversion rate, like per person it would sell X%, is actually doing half as well as they thought because there's twice as many people. So it just gives you that sort of anchor to say, okay, there's something we need to do here, because at the baseline there were just way more people coming in than they thought, or there might be way more in certain assets at different times of the day. I've got lots of examples of this, but
I know you have. Incredible. And more incredible, I'm on time. And if anybody that knows me, that's really incredible. So look, fundamentally, we've got individual data, okay? Bone health density, one single thing that can affect so many more. We've got community collaborative data, creating better programs that will bring different people into our facilities. We've got genomic data, which just unlocks a whole different world, but with the safety of blockchain and tokenism. So it just leaves your facility. And if you get all of those things right and you know where people are in your facility, you can then invest in what this guy does, or what this lady does, or what he does, or anything else that we do, because there are many people in this room that do fantastic work. And it's not about singularity, it's about joining the dots and creating that strong narrative that people listen to us. Because by the way, we all listen to each other, but nobody really listens to us outside of the sector. But if we come together with a collaborative, more meaningful narrative, backed up by data, I'll be the first person to bang on number 10. But I'm pretty sure I'll be 281st in line because you lot will all be there as well. Okay? So, this is where it all goes Pete Tong, because I'm going to start asking questions, and I've told everybody to jump in. But fundamentally, we're going to start with a few sets of questions, and we're going to look at the individual versus collective. So, personalization at scale, okay? Is it a contradiction or is it an opportunity? Because James and Ian, you both deal with hyper-personalized data, genetics and health markers. And Tanya, you work on the collaborative or community side of stuff. Okay, so the question to you three is, how do we balance personalized insights with community scale programming? Can they really, truly coexist? Ian.
I'll try and answer that the best I can. So we individualize. We obviously do the echo light screening for individuals. We do that out of our centre in Leeds, and we've set up numerous different places in the community that you can access that screen. You will then get a full report on the back of that, which is your data to have. Scale-wise, community, we're already doing that. So what we're doing now, my background's operations. I did 20 years of operations before I moved over to product. So my aim is to get into health clubs, because I think that that's something that we should be doing. We know that it's coming thick and fast, and it's a really good way for the operator to add value to their proposition, show that they care about their health, not just the run-of-the-mill kind of gym equipment. Not saying that everyone does that, I don't mean it in that way, but you get the point. Yep. Will it drive retention? Absolutely. Will it drive a new member? Potentially. And you get a secondary revenue at the same time. So we're doing revenue share to have access to that data. And that's how we're kind of scaling it up. But there's a couple of leisure trusts that we've been working with, and actually we're quite fortunate, actually down in Brixton with Mark, who's in the front table. And we met the mayor there, and he was like, well, this is amazing. Why could you not be doing this in public places such as libraries? So we've now opened that up even further now, and now we're taking it into businesses for workplace health. An example was I got approached by the Norwegian health minister probably about a month ago, because in Scandinavia, just going a little bit off tangent, but they have a major issue with female health in the workplace, and females returning back into the workplace after menopause and after having babies. Yep. So they needed to get a proactive. We had the top 100 companies in Oslo at the SHE conference. We went and presented what we're doing, and we're now implementing that into the workplace so that they feel there's more of a proactive healthcare approach in hope that females will return to the workplace, because there's not enough of them around the boardroom, and they see that as a major problem on the balance shift. So
affecting other
that's
sectors.
Scalability from individual to community, and now into UK and Europe. So,
and affecting productivity, national GDP,
100%.
etc. Tanya.
I think for us it comes back to that same point that I spoke about in the beginning. The community side can only be led with the right decisions if the data in the beginning is right. So by having that personalisation data on an individual level, first of all, gives us the ability to make the right decisions for these community-led programmes. For example, we do health-led programming that really focus on MSK, diabetes. The results of those programmes, individualised, give the feedback to the individual. But for the cohort size and the community scaling, that's where things become really important. I'm really keen to get out of these small programs where there are 12 people on a Tuesday at 10 o'clock that are all running diabetic programs, which are amazing programs, but how can we scale them when they're stuck in a very small environment for a 12-week period? And what we do through the use of data, because we can prove the success of our diabetes program, is roll that out on a mass scalable level. So it's using the data that we get from the personalisation in the individuals to make the right decisions on how we scale effectively and bring it up to much, much larger community-led progress.
Absolutely. And if you don't know, a national survey, you only need 2,000 people to call it a national survey. So you multiply that over a few times, we can create world-class case studies in an instant. We already have that data, by the way, but that will be me going off on a tangent.
Well, I'll give you some data, because this is my favourite fact.
Good.
So our diabetes study, there was a study done using our diabetic program, and after 24 weeks of using no other change to people's lifestyles other than eGym for 2 times a week for that 24 weeks, 39% of the participants no longer needed their diabetic medication. And that's because their HbA1c markers in their blood were low enough for them to then come off of medication. So I'm sure there's someone in the room that knows how expensive diabetic medication is for type 2. No? It's £11 billion a year to the NHS.
Wow.
Close, well done. So if we look at a 39% reduction in that, that's nearly £3 billion back as a saving to the NHS. This is tangible, real-life data. This isn't just finger in the air. This is stuff that we're doing and we're working on every day.
Yeah, and we need to do our pilots, because some of you might have heard me say this before, but there are more fucking pilots in the NHS than there are in the RAF. So we need to take our data to them and create our arguments, okay? So James, same question to you.
Yeah, so I think understanding your genetic and epigenetic data is applicable to everybody. And it's quite interesting. If you think where we are today, we've got more health data than ever before. We look at more metrics, more biomarkers, more data points. We've got more fantastic health tech than ever before, but we've got more confusion than ever before. I mean, from a nutritionist point, I've been a dietitian for 20, well, it seems like about 100 years, but it's about 20 years now. And John's been vegan for a year, and he feels fantastic.
Amazing.
But then Sarah, she can do backflips out of bed, and she's doing the carnivore diet. So we're all really confused about what to eat, what to do with exercise, and I think we are drowning in information, for want of an expression. And I think genetic data does allow you to cut through that noise and understand what's for you. And all of us sat here today, we're all exactly the same from a DNA and genetics point of view to about 99.9%. It's just that 0.1% when things start getting really interesting and what makes you different. And I think extrapolating that data from an individual to a community won't really be that difficult.
Absolutely, incredible. And once you start pulling those cohorts of data, there are patterns. Patterns create better decisions, and who knows where we'll go with our products and our services. And we will serve people better because we are, as you quite rightly say, all different. So staying on the individual versus collective, obviously, we're designing spaces and programs. Who's actually turning up? Yeah, who do we think is turning up, or who could be turning up? You have all this actual kind of behavioural data. We're seeing stuff, very early on from our point of view at Chertsey. But, Duncan, how does that compare to what facilities believe is actually happening?
Well, generally, it's sort of people are working off gut feel. So when you give them real data on how their space is used by minute, there's always a surprise. There's always an unknown in there. For a start, that 700 swipes versus 1,400 entries was just a classic example. But interesting sort of more smaller scale examples, like the changing rooms, for example, I think they were being cleaned consistently every couple of hours or whatever. But it turns out that the female changing rooms were much busier through the day and had different peaks. And so what it means, you can do things like change your cleaning rotas so that you're cleaning after those peaks and it reduces the complaints, that sort of stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think is the case and might be different from site to site. But until you measure that, occupancy in the changing rooms or the pools, you don't really know what's there. So there's often surprises, and they're definitely site specific. So yeah, I think many like that.
Yeah, exactly. Incredible stuff. But in terms of eGym, does it ever challenge the assumptions? What's actually happening with the older populations, or the rehab patients?
Yeah, I was going to throw my diabetes stat out now, but
you've used it.
I've used it
again.
already.
No one.
I've got many more, don't worry. One of the things that I talk a lot to people around is eGym hasn't reinvented strength training. Strength training has been around for a long time. We all know the benefits of strength training. What we've done is make it really easy for people to strength train and make it really comfortable and really gamified and all of the things that we're really good at. So all we're doing is giving the ability for these older groups that usually we would assign to not going into these environments in the gym, walk into a free weights area and start lifting this level of weights. We're bringing them into much softer scenes, much more comfortable environments where we're making it so much more easier for them to train. And again, because we're collecting so much data around that, being able to see, for example, that 60-plus-year-olds in the UK that use eGym increase their strength by 25% in the first 6 months, that again becomes a tangible data source to say it's not that these people can't do it. It's the fact that we're giving them a safe space to be able to do it, and oh my God, look at the results. We start putting that against falls prevention, and are they less likely to end up in hospital with a fractured rib and have 12 months to live? All of these things that we're kind of pinning together now is all around. These people aren't against doing it, they just don't understand how to, or they need it to be made really simple. And that's the benefit of what we do through software. It's not reinventing strength training.
Absolutely. And coming on to that point about data, this is the big one, isn't it? It's the ownership, it's the trust, it's the security. Really, who owns that data? and who should own that data? Maybe not 23andMe, because now they're using it as a liquidation asset, because once a company goes into liquidation, the liquidators grab hold of that asset and they are selling it. And there is a mass panic right now to basically unload or delete that data. But if you don't delete it, they will sell it. So T's and C's, privacy, which is what we're going to touch on for everybody. Somebody's just flashed a 15 minutes board, so we'll keep them fairly short if we can. But James, you're pioneering blockchain secured DNA tokens, and this is really to speak of that problem with 23andMe. How does that change that dynamic of research and consent and value?
No idea. No, in all seriousness, I've been thrown under the bus a little bit today because I've been asked to talk about genetics, which is fairly confusing, and then you've got epigenetics, which is a little bit more confusing, and then a sprinkling of blockchain, which is a bit more confusing. So just get a raise of hands quickly. Who understands or got a basic understanding of genetics? Quite disappointing that the Moody team didn't put their hand up there. Oh dear. And then epigenetics. And then blockchain. Brilliant. So I've got carte blanche to say anything.
Yeah,
no one knows what I'm talking about.
It's fine.
Great. Okay. So I think it flips it on its head completely, because it gets rid of big pharma using your data, large corporates, and God forbid the government using your data. It puts you in complete control. So it's the main things in relation to blockchain is you apply your consent, you've got complete traceability and transparency, which are the main things. Yeah. I mean, we go out to work every day, we all get paid, hopefully at the end of every month, and why can't your data do that for you as well? It's just your digital version of you. So you should be getting some sort of reward for that as well. And I think the days of ticking a box and forgetting about your data are long gone. You'll be able to use your data in your benefit with your consent anytime, anywhere. So it's a complete game changer.
Fantastic. So there is a Mudo kit in your bag for you to do your genetic data. You control that data. You have that value of that data. And if you are asked for research, you will be able to say yes or no. It's your consent, it's your data. But you'll also earn from it. So when you all turn up in Ferraris next year, we know there's been a lot of genetic research going on, and you've all said yes. But fundamentally, you are in control of that data. And that is where that very much unregulated sector has changed dramatically over the last few years. But right now, with the way that Mudo work, you're safe, okay? There's nothing to worry about. And you always want to feel like you're in control. So Tanya and Duncan, when you're gathering your data, which is tons of data, especially movement points and everything that's happening, and effort on machines and stuff, you're doing that through your training equipment, you're doing that through your cameras. How do you balance those insights with privacy?
Yeah, I can take it first, that's fine. I think you covered it really well in saying that it's about being really transparent. People want personalised experiences, and to be able to get a personalised experience, we have to take some sort of data to be able to do that. We are all very aware of our compliances, we're all very aware of our privacy policies. I think it's our job to be responsible and ethical in following all of those and being transparent with the members and the people that are within our journey on why we're using that data. So for the member, it's all about personalising that experience, making sure that we've got enough of that enriched data to say we are going to give you the most personalised and best experience, because ultimately you're here to reach an end goal, and we're going to use that data to support that. But when we start looking at how we use that data outside of that member, it's all about that anonymised cohort data again. So we want to be able to put ourselves in a position where we're really shouting about the data and what we're achieving, but it's anonymised, and we're not talking about Jan, who is at whatever site we're talking about. It's mass cohort data. So I think as long as everybody is following all their privacies and we are all fully aware of what we're giving our data for, we are also a humanised, that's not even a word, we're just making stuff up now. But we are also at the moment very aware of data, and we're actually pretty scared of it. So people are really dubious. So I think as long as we're all being cautious and safe, then everything is absolutely fine. But I am also aware on the other end of the spectrum, and we joked about this earlier, that I was in a really dark, seedy bar in Liverpool, which sounds awful, at the weekend. But to get Wi-Fi in that bar for 10 minutes, I gave my first name, last name, date of birth, and my email address. So we are also creatures that say if we want something and we need it, we are prepared to give it up. So our data almost becomes a buy-in cycle of what we're prepared to give it for. I was prepared to give that level of data to get some Wi-Fi because I was clearly bored, but we also have to make sure that there are the privacies that sit behind it. Is my point.
Brilliant. Duncan.
Yeah, Tanya, I totally agree. It's about kind of informed consent about what you're getting for what you're giving, I think is the key. For us, it's slightly different in that we don't want any personal data. We really just want to give you the sort of numbers on how your space is used. We don't need to know details about the person to do that, so we never gather that data. And it means it's sort of easy to deploy it. You don't have to worry about sort of gathering things about the individual. And more importantly, I think you don't need to gather that data to learn a lot and be able to action a lot in your space. You know, to know that one asset is twice as busy as another doesn't require any personal data. So that's useful to, you know, you can do lots without it, as far as I'm concerned. The other thing is that as a member or user or as a visitor, often people behave differently if they know you are gathering data without them knowing about it, right? So we did an interesting launch of a sort of feedback system where people can just speak naturally into effectively a microphone and just tell you what they think of the space. You know, the coffee's too cold, people are not friendly, or it's really lovely. And they're just speaking naturally. But the thing is, they don't have to say who they are, they don't have to give any details. And what it meant is that people were giving 5 to 10 times as much feedback because they weren't connected to it and they didn't have to fill in forms and things. But it was interesting because I think if you make them fill in details about who they are, it does change the experience. So I think you can gather a lot and do a lot without having to take anything personal. And I think it's always that trade-off.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And in, you know, in the clinical rehab space, you know, you're taking individual metrics and data. So, you know, what their health data is used for, are people aware of that? I mean, how does that work on your side?
Yeah, they are, but much to the point, some people have kind of over-mentioned it already. So it depends how much they're happy to give, but also I think we give it quite willy-nilly these days. Yeah. So ours is a generic disclaimer.
Yep.
We're pretty clear that we are using that, we potentially might use that data for further research. The individual or the facility owns that Echo Light, has that data. The report obviously goes to the individual, and then Echo Light as a whole, Epicenter, takes all of that data, because that is value. 5-10 years' time, that's going to be huge. And we're actually just working on it now because next year the Echo Light is future-proof to start looking at sarcopenia, which is muscle wastage. So we want to be able to send the reports straight to your GP with videos so the GP can then interpret it. So we're currently looking at that at the moment of what that disclaimer looks like too. So
Fantastic. Brilliant. And I knew we'd do this because essentially there's got lots to say. So we could probably do this for 2 hours, but you know, it's pretty obvious to me. I'm going to answer a question just because I can, because I'm stood here. But can our data talk to each other? Well, yes, it can. These guys are already doing it. I've seen it. But what about if all our data talk to each other? If we knew what the cause and effect was of different modalities and different interventions and all this stuff. So I'm going to answer this really quickly because I've had a 10-minute board. But fundamentally, these guys are already doing this stuff. You know, and it's not about singularity. It's about interconnected data points and creating that better narrative. So moving on to the next question very quickly, James, because again, I have experience in this myself. I've done a genetic test. I was all endurance and I worked out for power in a power sport. And it didn't quite add up. But when that happens, what do we do?
I think people need to remember that your DNA is your foundation. It's not your fate. So just because you're predisposed to being an endurance athlete, a power lifter, you don't have to do that. It just means that if you did decide to do it, you'd probably excel at it. And I'll give you an example. I mean, when I first had my genetic test back years and years ago, I had quite a strong genetic predisposition to sitting on the sofa, watching the rugby with a beer. And I'm struggling with that, and I've been struggling it for years. I mean, I'd much rather be pushing the shopping trolley around Tesco's or going to Home Bargains. So every day is a struggle.
Of course it is, if you believe that. So, you know, let's think about this and the road ahead, because this is where we're headed. The opportunity is massive. We know that. Are we going to do something about it? So I'm going to just skip ahead to the last slide, because I think you've heard enough here today to understand what the opportunity is and where the conversations need to happen. We're an incredible industry with incredible people, and we don't get the recognition that we need because we don't speak a collective, collaborative language. And we need to do that better, and we need to serve the population with the thing that I know and you all know that we can do. So skipping ahead to literally the last question on this slide, because I have 5 minutes, so that's 1 minute each-ish. What excites you most about where it's all going? But equally, there's always the other side of it. What worries you the most? 1 minute each, go.
Do you want me to go first?
Start, whoever wants to go first.
Okay, so up from put my nutritionist hat on. The data that we're seeing now, and we're at the forefront of, we'll be able to get rid of these stupid things called recommended daily allowances for vitamins and minerals. You'll be able to target specifically how much you need, or we can get rid of this archaic calculation that was calculated after the war, and we can actually get some decent nutritional recommendations.
The food industry will never change. Okay, Duncan.
I think what excites me is, I mean, all of this incredible data, the fact that as a consumer, right, you can now get targeted, specialized, ultra-specific workouts and everything that will make us healthier and a better society, and I think that we are moving in that direction. What worries me is that it does require investment and commitment to do all of this, right, as an operator. And so what you might find is that there's a sort of separation of the people that invest and do all this stuff early, and you get kind of the haves gyms and then the sort of have-nots, and you might get, sort of inequality of access. And I think that's the sort of thing that worries me. And you want the rising tide to bring all boats up, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. Ian, you've got the mic?
Yeah, I think we're experiencing a generational shift. I think that's the exciting piece. I think since COVID, it's woke up our eyes to a lot of stuff. Our eyes woke up. So I think we go to the NHS. They save lives and they're really good at it, but they're not there for your proactive healthcare. And that's all now, you're on your own with that, and that's up to you with different areas, and you've heard from today, to take that healthcare into your own hands from a proactive standpoint. Where I think there's a huge opportunity here, and the exciting bit is how health clubs, wellness centres, longevity centres, call them what you wish, have that opportunity now, because the individual who's taken that proactive healthcare into their own hands needs your help and support to give them the facility to go and do that.
Tanya, the last word.
God, it's dangerous. For me, it's matching what you're saying. I think that when we're kind of creating ourselves in a really good position from a preventative healthcare space, we've got the data, we can show what we can do. For me, the excitement is, where do we take it next? How do we get in the room with the NHS? How do we really start to show that we have our place within this healthcare space? But it doesn't frighten me. I don't lose sleep over it, but I don't want to lose the human connection. I think data is amazing, automation is amazing, and we're all working on this great stuff that does that. But our industry shouldn't lose fact on the fact that humans are a really important touch point, and from the emotional connection, I just don't want to lose that.
Fantastic. I couldn't have put it better myself. It is all about people. You are the people to do this. These are the people that have talked to you about a few things today. What gets measured gets managed. Okay? So think about that. Think about the health side of stuff that David talked about this morning. We're talking about well-being, wellness. How do we integrate our language into the NHS? It's there for the taking. Thank you very much, Ian, Tanya, James, and Duncan. Thank you.
Stay there. Thank you so much, everybody. Nathan, just hold on for 1 second. So just tell us, actually, let me move this. These are all in the goodie bags. Can you just tell us what we need to do in order for people to... Guys, check this out, because this is available to every single one of you.
It's quite easy. It's quite easy. You've got a tube and a little funnel here. You pop the funnel in the top. It's not very glamorous. You spit in the tube, seal it, put it in the bag, and send it back to us. It's fairly easy from the instructions. You just log in, enter your details, and then you'll be notified when your results are coming in.
How long will it take?
About 2-3 weeks.
And then what will people receive on the back of it? That will all come through the app, right?
Everything's in the app, yeah.
Who's excited to try that? Who's going to do it? Thank you so much. Let's give Nathan a big round of applause. And yes, so our second keynote speaker of the day, he just gave me one of the books that he's written, and I met Timu yesterday. By the way, actually, before I say that, please know that when we finish at around somewhere between 5:15 and 5:30, there's food and drink that's available to everyone, and we'll be bringing it out. So who's excited about that? Anyone hungry? Yeah, absolutely. So I met Timu yesterday, And he's one of those people that when he speaks, for me, you immediately get a sense of this person knows who they are and what they're passionate about. I think this is the 6th book that he has written. And when it comes to this whole thing about longevity and biohacking, I think there are so many people that you could follow, and you might want to be careful who you follow, because sometimes people, what they know, what they do isn't based on really any kind of research, based on any experience. Timu really is at the forefront of longevity, and I really would love you to give him a really big welcome onto the stage. Please, Timu.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, got it here. Longevity Gold Rush. So, as kind of a closing keynote, I'm going to give you a little deep dive into the future of this industry. And it is literally like Klondike. There's a huge opportunity, not just in terms of money, but also in terms of not just your lifespan, but health span, the healthy years in your life. And there's this saying that if you don't make space for wellness, eventually you will have to make space for illness. All right. My background is that, although I look quite young, I'm 42. And I started my first company when I was 16. I've been kind of a child prodigy. I learned programming when I was 13, and